guys, today this is what we'll be creating. We'll be damaging this building, making it more post-apocalyptic. We'll be setting up our camera, modeling out the building, projecting the footage texture onto it, adding damage, and in part 2, we'll be adding ivy and moss to those as well. We'll work on the lighting, we'll export everything to After Effects, and then we'll do our compositing inside of After Effects. So let's jump right in and get started. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is set up our scene. I'm going to go over to the render engine and set it to cycles, experimental, and GPU compute. For the viewport sampling, I'm going to set the noise threshold to 0.5, and I'll just click denoise for now. I'm going to go into color management and set that to standard. Then I'm going to go into the scene. I'm going to make sure that when we render it, we're going to render as an OpenEXR multi-layer. I'm just going to max that out. Color management is going to be follow scene. And then I'm just going to check a few of these things. So Z, mist. Mist is what we're going to use for our Z depth pass. We'll do shadow, ambient occlusion. We don't need a shadow catcher because we're not going to see the ground. Crypto matte, we'll probably want to do that by, actually, let's do it by material because some objects are going to have multiple materials. So now that we have that set up, I'm going to select the camera. I'm going to go over here to the right and select the camera, and I'm going to enable background images, click on it, and we'll add our still image. So we'll take our clean plate and load it into the camera. I'm going to hit 0 on the number pad to enter the camera view. This is good for now. Go to perspective plotter now and choose 3 vanishing points. So we have X, Y, and Z. Hit plot perspective. And just a little trick here. If we go into view, make sure camera to view is not selected so that we can zoom in and we're not actually changing the position of the camera. We're just zooming into the viewport. This is going to make plotting these lines a little bit easier. If you select something, you hold shift and you hit spacebar, you can select move, rotate, scale, transform, and a bunch of other things. So I just selected move, and now we have this gizmo here. The x-axis is left and right. If we're out like this, x-axis is left and right, y-axis is the depth, and z-axis is up and down. I'll press 0 on the number pad to go back into the camera view. You can kind of see how this lays out. I'm just going to enable this for now. Technically, we're looking at it sort of somewhere like this. This is not an exact match, but let's say this is a rough estimate. If our depth is y, then we need lines that match up to that axis. So that would be any of these frames in the windows, this section of the cement right here, this down here. All of that will work for our depth. And then for up and down, obviously, we can just take any of the edges of the windows. We can take the edge of the column here. And then for our x-axis, we can probably take this line here or a line over here. Just something that goes left and right. Okay, so for perspective plotter, if I just enable 3 vanishing points here and I hit plot perspective, now we can align this. Let's do our depth first. So I'm going to take the y-axis and I'm just going to plot this one. And we're just going to rough this in for now, so I'm not going to worry too much about accuracy. We'll just get it in the ballpark. Then we can go back and adjust it later. This line right here for our z-axis. And you can see there's a little bit of a curvature happening, and that's because of the lens distortion, but that's fine. That'll just give us an approximate estimation there. Same thing here. And then for the x-axis, I am going to take this line here, and then also this line here, and line that up. That's pretty good. And if I just move this up and down, you can see that that aligns pretty well to that window right there. So that's pretty good, but let me just disable this camera to view. I know I said not to have that checked, so you want to make sure you don't have that checked while you're working. Now I can zoom in here, and if I move this box down a little bit, it's not bad. It could be fixed, so let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to hide the box so that we can get a better view of what's going on here. Just select it and hit H to hide objects. Just going to line this up here. So roughly around there. This one looks pretty good. Just fix that. Okay, and then we'll do the depth. That lines up better, and then we'll do the x-axis here. Okay, we'll unhide our box by hitting Alt-H. It does seem a little bit off from this window ledge, but I think overall that looks pretty good. So I'm going to delete the box and I'll add a plane. One of the last things I'm going to do here is actually select the camera and then go into item and then just lock these so that we can't accidentally move the camera. So for instance, if I have this selected, if I hit G, it's not moving it because it's locked. And I'm going to rotate this so RY -90. and that'll kind of lock it in even increments there as we rotate it. And I'm just going to move this over, so GX. So for this, we can just select this edge, bring it all the way up to the top, so GZ, and we'll just align it with the edge of the building up top there. It doesn't have to be exact also, that's another thing. I'm going to hit 1 so that I can just select this vertex and hit GZ and bring that up a little bit. And then this one I'll hit GZ and just kind of align that a little bit better. So now I can hit 2, select this edge and hit GY, and that's going to slide it all the way to the back. And we'll just move in and align that here. So GY. So right there looks good for the top one, and we just need to move the bottom one now. So I'll hit 1, select that vertex and hit GY, push it back until it aligns with the edge of the building there. This stuff here we're just not going to see because it's going to be covered by ivy, and also the background plate's going to be there, so we're not really going to have to worry about that too much. So then I'll just select this edge and hit GY and just bring it all the way over. And then this one, GZ, and just bring it all the way down. So that's going to cover most of the building. We'll tab out of edit mode. Then from here, we're going to have to subdivide this in order to project the geometry onto it. First, let's go into our UV editing space. We'll apply a material, so I'll hit new. This button right here next to base color, and I'll do image texture. And then we'll open up the image texture and put our clean plate as our texture. I'll just switch over to texture mode. Now you see it doesn't project properly. That's because we don't have enough geometry on the mesh. So I'll hit 3, tab into edit mode and hit Control R. Here we can just add more cuts. Now I'm actually gonna hit 3 on the number pad. So let's get out of edit mode first. Hit 3 on the number pad. We're looking at it direct on, so it's flat, but we're looking at the wrong side. And you could tell because as I rotate around here, you can see the camera's on this side. So what we want to do is hit 3, then hold Control and hit 3 again. That'll flip it to the other side. So we'll select our mesh, hit Tab, Control R to add edge loops, and we'll add one in the middle, and then you can move it around, but I'm just going to hit right click to recenter it, and then I'll hit Control R again with my mouse cursor around here, and that's going to cut it horizontally. So same thing, left click, right click, and then I'll add another cut here, left click, right click, and here, left click, right click, here, 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 and here, there, and there. Basically what you want to do is when you cut it, you want to make sure that it's even. So I'm going to hit 3 and then A to select everything. 3 will bring us into face selection mode. So 3 and then A, and then right click and do subdivide, and then subdivide one more time, and that should be a pretty good start. Tab out of that, hit 0 on the number pad to go back into our camera view, and then I'll select our mesh, tab, A to select everything, U on the keyboard, and then go to project from view. And that's going to align the UVs. It's going to project them from the camera view. So now the UVs are aligned to the building. And then if we tab out of this, we can see that our building is projected properly onto the mesh. There's a little bit of weirdness going on the edges, but this is the camera border. So anything outside of that border is just going to be projected in a weird way. So what we can do is go into our shading mode. We'll select our mesh. And then on this node, we can, instead of doing repeat, we could just do clip, and it'll get rid of that. So if I hit 0 on the keyboard, you can see that anything outside of the camera view is clipped. I'm just going to adjust the roughness here. So I'm just going to pull that up and pull the specular all the way down. And that'll get rid of any kind of sheen or anything like that. One of the other things that we can do is instead of taking our color and plugging it into base color, because this is going to be affected by lighting, what we can do is actually take the color and plug it into emission, and that'll preserve the luminance, the color values of everything. But I kind of don't mind it being affected by the light. That's kind of what I want, because I want to make this side of the building darker. So I'm actually not going to plug it into emission, and I'm just going to use the base color. But just know that that's an option if you didn't want it to be affected by any lighting. So you can see it's pretty dark, but that's okay. If I find our light here, you can see that we are essentially relighting the building. Now, that's not technically what I want to do. I'm just going to move this light up and then out of the way. So in order to get a good light level on the building itself, we need an HDRI. So I'm going to hit N. I have a plugin called Easy HDRI. And we'll just navigate to our HDRI folder. And how this works is that you want to navigate to the folder. You're not actually picking an HDRI here. So I'll hit accept. And then from here, we'll hit create world nodes and then select the HDRI. Let's do this one because this has some trees in it. So that's a little bit better. And we can rotate it from here. So we'll just take rotation for the Z axis and spin it around. And actually, if I go into Eevee, it's going to move a lot faster. So we'll just align it. Trees are on the left side of the frame in real life, but the sun is behind the building. So I'm just going to rotate this. This is the sun right here in the HDRI. So I'm just going to roughly match that. So I'll just move this there. And that's pretty good. I'm going to bring the sun strength slightly up because I don't want it to be too blue, but then the sky strength I'll bring so 0.8, and then actually we'll just do like 20 for the sun strength. I'm going to switch back over to cycles so that we get a better view of what we're doing, because that's how we're going to render it anyway. One of the things that I'm seeing here is that we're getting this overlap, and it's two images. It's basically the background image and the HDRI. In order to just see the background image, we can select the camera. We'll select the camera on the right-hand side, go to background images, and turn the opacity of the background image up all the way. So now we can see the background image with our mesh here. And that's looking pretty good. That lighting works. I think that matches. One of the things I'm noticing is that it's a little wavy. So that's because we don't have enough geometry. So click on our mesh, tab into it. If all the faces aren't selected, just hit A and then right click and subdivide it a couple more times. That should get rid of that waviness that we had. We can go ahead and add some thickness to this because we're gonna have to cut a huge hole in the side of the building, so we need some thickness. So what we'll do is we'll select our mesh, go over to our modify panel, and then select solidify. Move over to the right here. If we just increase the thickness, now we want to go in the positive direction so that it's not extruding toward the camera. If I go this way, it's extruding it toward the camera. That's not what we want. So we'll go in the positive direction and extrude it back. So now if we look up top, we can see that we have thickness going on there. And we want to mark actually where we're going to take a hole out of this thing. So I think the best place to do that is right here. So we can probably do this and just take a chunk out right here, I think. One of the things we want to keep in mind is that if we want to see the hole, we need to take a lot more out of the front here. So we need that space so that we can see the floors in there, and then some of the other detail that we're going to put there, the thickness and the floor that we're going to add. So we need to make sure that we subtract more closer to the camera. So we'll just go ahead and do that. Let me just erase this. So I'll hit 3, hold control, hit 3 again. I'm going to create a cube. Let's go back into the camera view for 1 second. I'm going to rotate this along the x-axis 45 degrees, and then we'll just bring it up and then over. And this is going to mark where we're going to remove this large piece from. So I would say there should be good. We're going to use this as a guide. I'm going to use a plugin called Noisy Cutter. What this allows us to do is draw a mesh and then use that as a way to cut the mesh that we're drawing on top of. So we can take our draw cutter tool, create this V shape, and come out. Now remember, we have to move a lot from the front. So we're just going to go ahead and do that. And that's our spline that we drew. So we'll tab out of that because I think we're good. Actually, you know what? I'm actually going to select this and just move it over a little bit because I don't really like the way that looks there. Kind of just move that. All right, that looks good. So I'll tab out of edit mode for the spline. And basically this is just a line. With the line selected, we'll hit mesh cutter, and that's going to make a mesh out of the line. Click that. And now if I rotate around it, you can see that it's made a mesh out of it and it's actually cutting into the building. So if I move this out of the way, we can see that the mesh cutter is intersecting with the building, and that's where the building is going to be cut. We'll click off of that and click on the mesh that we want to cut, in this case our building, and then we'll hit cut. It's going to calculate for a little bit and then create a new mesh with our cut. So this is our original mesh. Let's rename this. So original mesh. And then this is our cut building. And actually, let me rename this original building. Now I'm just going to turn this off, and now you can see that there's a cut here. So I don't really like the cut that we made, but I'm going to use this as a guide. So we'll select our original building, and I'm just going to annotate this. So we came in through here, ended down here, and then we cut here and ended there. So now I have a guide of where to cut. I'll hide the cut building. I'll click on the original building, and then let's draw this again. So we'll draw this. We'll come in here and just intersect at this point. Kind of come down, hit this point, and then come back up. So go through that, and then up and out this way. tab out of that, I'm going to hit Mesh Cutter, and you can see that we've created that cut again. And then one of the things that I can do here is actually increase the strength and then decrease the scale a little bit and hit Update. And you can see that that made it a little more rough. That noise pattern's a little too strong. So for the strength, I'm going to maybe go down to 0.8 and then update it again. Pretty good. And we have a pretty good density in this mesh. I just hit tab so you can view that, so you can see how much that mesh is subdivided. Maybe I can bring the scale down to 0.14 and update that. We'll do this again, but we'll do 0.12 and then 0.8 update. That's looking pretty good. Okay, so we'll select that, cut, and we'll hide our original building, see what that looks like. All right, that's pretty good. And the cool thing about this is if we go into our materials, we can see here that it created another material. So if we tab while we have this selected, deselect everything, we hit select, we can see that it's only selecting the faces of the noisy cutter. So those are our new generated faces. And if we deselect that, and then we move over to our original material and hit select, you see that the noisy cutter faces are not selected, but everything else is. So now we can kind of distinguish and select those faces. And we have two materials assigned to those different faces. The noisy cutter material for the broken interfaces here, and then our original projected material. So we'll just rename this projected material, broken interfaces. So if I just view this from the camera view, you can see how much we've taken out up front, and then we've generated this new mesh here. And so this is going to be facing our camera. So this is good. I'm going to delete this box that we made as a guide. And I'm also going to erase these annotations that I made. So a couple things I want to do here real quick. I'll select our mesh and hit tab, and we can see here that these parts go in. And so what I want to do is make sure that we recreate that in the mesh. I'm not going to go too crazy with it, but I'm just going to grab our knife tool and kind of cut along this seam here. Hit enter, and then what I can do is actually take all these faces here and we can push them in. Now the reason why we want to do this is because we're going to be adding ivy, and so the ivy is going to wrap around the building into these places here. So I want to make sure that the ivy behaves properly when we apply it to the building. So with those faces selected, I can hit E on the keyboard, and you can see that we can push that in along the X axis. Now the reason why this weird thing is happening is because we added a Solidify modifier, and now we're pushing these faces past the back faces created by the Solidify modifier. So what we can do is actually push them further, and then we can actually select these faces here. That's good, and delete faces. So now if we rotate and we kind of come back in here, we can see that we have that we pushed back there. And if we go to the other side, we can see that we've extruded these faces inward. So we don't really need to adjust them too much more. I think that's fine. But one thing we need to do is fix the stretching here. So what we can do is tab into edit mode, and then we'll just select all these faces. Make sure you're in the camera view when you do this. And we can just go into our UV editing mode and just hit U, project from view. That'll fix the stretching because it'll reproject those faces onto the original shot here. So if we click off of it, you can see that's no longer stretched. And we're going to have to go in and do the same thing for this down here. So again, with all those selected, we just hit E on the keyboard, hit X, and then move it back. And then we can just select these and delete them. Then we can just select these faces again, the ones that are stretched, hit U, project from view, and that's fixed. So one of the things here is I actually want to move these a little further back because you can see a difference in lighting. So what I want to do is actually just move them, so hit GX and just move them all the way out so that you can't see them anymore. So same thing with these over here. So again, U, project from view, and now that's fixed. So let's select our camera and just get rid of the background image. So uncheck that just for now while we work. So now we want to add a texture to the broken faces that we have here. Right now they're just a color, and we can actually take this color and switch it so you can see it a little bit better. So let's go ahead and do that. So what we want to do is we want to add a texture to this so it looks like the side of the building is broken. So I have this damaged concrete texture here. One of the problems with Quixel Bridge at the moment when using it with Blender is that it doesn't export to any of the versions of Blender 3 that I'm aware of. And the workaround basically is to export it to a version of Blender 2.9. Here I'm running Blender 2.93.9. Quixel Bridge will export to this. So what I'll do is I'll just go into my preview mode here. I'll select the cube and then we'll go into Quixel and we'll switch it to Blender and then I'll just hit export. And that should export properly. One of the things is that I actually downloaded this as an 8K texture, so I'll have to just re-export. So I'll select 8K and then hit export again and export it successfully. So if we go into Blender, go into shading, we can actually select our Quixel texture here. So that's looking good. We can just take this cube, copy, move to Blender 3 and paste it in here. And now we have our damaged concrete texture set up here. So if you don't see all the nodes, you can just hit home. That'll center all of them. So I'll move this out of the way. We'll go ahead and select our mesh that we're working on and make sure our second texture in the list is selected, the broken interfaces, and then from the drop down select damaged concrete to swap out the material for those faces. So the texture itself is looking really large, so we have to fix that. We actually have to scale it down. So what I can do is select the albedo, hit Control T, and that'll add some mapping nodes, and then we can just decrease the scale to get the size of the texture that we want. But because we have an albedo, ambient occlusion, roughness, and a normal map, we actually have to change the mapping for those as well. So we'll divide this and plug in the mapping to each one of these into the vector slot. And now if we change the scale in the mapping node, it's going to change all of these other nodes as well so that they'll correspond to each other and nothing will be thrown off. Now the problem is that we get this black ring because the displacement is actually moving that surface away from the other one. So if you see, if I just displace it even more, it's just moving that surface away. So we won't even bother with the displacement because it just doesn't seem like it's giving us any benefit. So we'll just leave that as is. And plus this is so far away and it's going to be covered with ivy anyway that it kind of just doesn't make sense to add displacement there. The normal map by itself will be enough to create the illusion of detail there, and that'll be enough to trick our eye. So the first thing we want to do is actually model out these windows. This is going to give us a little bit more control. The ivy is going to look better because it's going to catch on edges and things like that. The best way to do this that I found is just to go into edit mode, hit K to enable the knife tool. So we just kind of want to cut around the windows. If your knife tool is snapping and you don't want it to snap, you can just hold Control and that'll disable snapping. The only issue is that once you click and create a point, snapping is enabled again even if you're still holding Control. So you have to release Control and then press it again. A little bit of a, quirkiness there, but so we'll hit enter to confirm that, hit K again so that we can cut here for the frame, and then we can kind of just join all that. And once we're done, we just hit enter, and now we have our window. And if you just want it as one plane, you can select all of them, right click and hit dissolve faces, and that'll just merge them all into one. And then what you can do is hit P and then separate by selection. And then select this, P, separate by selection. And now these are their own objects. So you can actually texture these as a window now. So let's just go ahead and do that for this one. So we'll go into the shading mode. So we have this projection set up. We'll go ahead and create a new material and we'll use the projected material as a base, but we're going to rename this here. So just click that button so that it makes it its own distinct material and it's not an instance of anything. And we'll just do projected windows. So then what we can do is add a mix shader here. Plug that in. Duplicate the primary shader. There's no need to duplicate this. What we'll do is we'll just take this color, plug it into the base, and then plug this into this bottom shader. And to create a window material, we can just take our transmission, and it's probably better to do maybe like 0.8 and then turn the roughness down. Select that window. For this one too, we can just do projected windows. So now it might be hard to see, but if we just exit out, if we rotate around it, you can see that there's a live reflection there. I'll take the transmission and I'll put it all the way up to 1. And then to mix this, you can mix it with the factor. So let's just kind of zoom in here. If we turn it all the way down, that's the original projected material. If we turn this up to 1, you can see that that's there, and we get that reflection. Now it's turned dark, so that's why I was saying maybe like 0.75 or 0.8 might work. So let's do 0.7. Let's try that. And as I move this around, you can see that there's a reflection there. So let's do 0.8. You're just going to have to go around and do that for all of the windows. But one thing that we can do, and I think that this is really worth it, is just to go in here, cut a lot of these windows out, So after we cut them out, then we can create a broken glass shape here. Something like that. Hit enter. Then we can select these faces that we don't need and just delete them. So delete the faces. Now we're going to have to do it again because we added a Solidify modifier so that there's an inner thickness in there. And we just have to view it from the camera. So we're starting to, you know, we see that here. So just make sure that those faces are deleted so that we can actually see into the building. One of the other things that I like doing is after we break the windows like this, we can actually break the frame. If you deleted a little too much there, one of the things you can do is just go into edge selection mode, select those two and hit F, and that'll fill that back in. Now, again, we went back into the camera view and we're seeing some of these things here. So we want to delete these. And now we have a broken window there. Then we can take these broken pieces, select them, hit P, separate by selection. Now they're separate. So now we want to take this and just apply the Windows material to them. So we have the broken window, and you can see the reflections in both this one as well as this one. So you want to go through and do this for all of the windows on the building. So I'll just go ahead and do that. Okay, so I've gone through and I've added the window texture to a lot of the building windows, and I really like the way that looks. It looks really awesome. Unfortunately, we're not going to be, rotating around the building, but at least it adds some realism to the scene, and once we add IV, there might be some reflections and things like that that we see in the windows. I think it's a nice touch. Before we move any further, let's get organized here. So I'll create a new collection, and I'll add the building elements to it. So we'll just take all of these, drop them in there. And now what I can do is actually select all of them, hit Control A, and then apply all the transforms. So now when we add things like moss, it'll have the correct proportions, so we won't see anything weird with the textures or the moss that we're adding. So I'm just going to go ahead and add a base layer of moss to the entire thing. Basically how I'm going to do that is I'm going to append something I got from Decoded. And so I'm going to come in here and I'm going to grab his mossy material. And I'll go into the node tree folder, and then I'll select mossy, and I'll just hit append. Now what I can do is select our building projection material, and I'll go into group and add the mossy texture. And then what you can do is create our mixed shader, plug that in, and then just plug this into that one. And so actually I'm going to switch these, because basically what's happening here is if I turn this up, it gets rid of the moss, and if I turn it down, it adds the moss. Now the problem with that is it's kind of counterintuitive, so I'm just going to flip these. And so now if I turn it up, it adds the moss, and if I turn it down, it gets rid of the moss. So I'm just going to turn it up to 100%. I'm going to make it dry moss. So if you look at this, it's a nice moss texture. I'm going to go into cycles though, because it actually has some displacement to it. So I'm going to go into cycles. I think it might be kind of uneven. So what I'm going to do is just scale this to 0.2, 0.3, 0.4. And I'm just going to kind of play around until I get something that I like, a distribution that I like. And that's actually pretty good. So let's jump back a little bit. And then we can add some extra moss if we need it. I'm going to go with like a 0.6 for the extra moss. So another thing too is that I'm noticing that there's no moss on the windows. Actually, what we have to do is go into projected windows and add it. So we'll just set this up the same way. And actually we can just copy this. So copy, then paste. And then what we can do is, so we can plug that into there and then plug this into the surface. What we can do is just select a different distribution, and then we can also plug this into here. So we can actually take away the moss from the windows if we want. So I'm actually going to do 0.8 on the windows, and we'll just take a look here. So we have the moss there, and we have it on some of these windows, so that's good. I think the next step is probably just to start adding ivy. So that's it for part 1. Stay tuned for part 2, where we'll be adding ivy, extra floors to the building so you can see them through the windows and the various holes that we put in the building, and then we'll be adding ivy and moss to those as well. We'll work on the lighting, we'll export everything to After Effects, and then we'll do our compositing inside of After Effects. So stay tuned for that. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. It really helps me so that I can bring you guys more of these types of videos. If you have any questions, hit me up on social or email me at paul@pauldv.net. All the links are in the description. Stay tuned for part 2. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.